Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series finale of Legion. A great series finale. I think it's actually very beautiful how this whole situation ends up playing out. Obviously, I'll go into it more, but obviously I'm just going to run through everything that went down in this episode, because a lot of great things did. First and foremost, I love that scene between David and his dad. At first, he pulls out a fish. I was like, is that David just showing off to his dad? It's like, no, because that was a mistake. Then he pulls out a ball of light. I'm like, what the hell is this about to be? And he drops it, and it spikes up, and it becomes a mace. And then there's a specific name for that when the mace is on a chain and stuff like that. I think it's a flail. I think that's the name, if I remember correctly. Regardless, and then his dad pulls out something small. I was like, what is it? Oh, a bullet. And so I was like, hey, let's go to war. And lo and behold, there's the two Farouks in front of him. It's like, of course. And then David takes past Farouk, and his dad, takes present day or future Farouk. A lot of interesting things went down. First off, David being like, oh, you think it's one-on-one? You're forgetting I am... you're under the wrong impression because there are multiple of us. We are Legion. And slowly but surely they come out the door and Farouk is just blasting them and beating them back. But then they all kind of dogpile on and everything, which I love how that situation's handled. And I love Farouk still kind of gets the upper hand because he ends up flying them all back, and he sends the real David flying back and wraps him up in a straitjacket, which is like everything coming back full circle, just kind of just making him probably feel alone and crazy. I mean, that's the whole point, because that was what that represented, him feeling alone and all that. And so I thought that was kind of nice. And he's just like, I am good. I'm a good person. I deserve to be loved. And Farouk was like, no, you don't. And then he goes into the song and everything. And then his mom chimes in because it's obviously representing his mom present, with baby David singing to him, and they're just singing back and forth to each other. And he sees his mom cuddling him as a child, and it kind of makes him go, no, I am loved. And it's like, yeah, the power of love. And it sends Farouk. I like that Farouk was the actual straitjacket itself, and it's like, all right, time to die, which is so interesting because let's not forget, because it's also, that's how season 2's finale kind of went. That was how it was supposed to go, with him killing Farouk. But all the while that's happening, you have time kind of breaking even more. And I love that it's such a cool effect of just kind of they do something, it rewinds 3 seconds and kind of repeats, the whole episode kind of stutters. I mean, it's been doing that for a while, but I love that aspect of it. I just haven't really talked about just how I just love that effect of just kind of just kind of repeating, kind of rewind and replay a little bit. I just thought that was kind of neat. But then you have Sydney fighting off the time demons with a shotgun, and you have Carrie and Carrie coming together. I love the explanation for it too. It's basically because they kind of the time demons, they eat at time. They kind of basically, everyone's got a time aura, basically a temporal aura around them. But it's if we combined together, our two auras will become as one, but it will look like two, and it will confuse them, which it does, and that lets Carrie do her thing of just slicing and kicking through all of them, which I love. That Carrie, being who she is, she loves a good battle, and it's hell yeah. I even love it during part of it, Carrie is oh, I don't want to die, but she's ain't nothing better than dying in a good fight, essentially, just showing you just how opposite they are about this whole situation. But what was interesting is, maybe they explained it and I missed it, but Carrie getting older, is that just kind of a progression of them being together so long, or was it just the fact it's because they're fighting the time demons are eating away at her time or whatever? Is that what that's supposed to represent, or is it because they are together, but they're together in such an odd way, and just because that's having that effect on her? I think I associate it with, because they're literally fighting time. The longer she's fighting time, the more of her own time is getting eaten up. So all the while that's happening, I love, because Gabrielle is oh my, she's thinking her craziness has kind of gotten to her, and she's even going I finally understand, you guys are gods. And you have Sydney being I wish. And it was so interesting. She says a line where she's David, whatever you're doing, do it quick. I was wait, you're going, I guess because it's if David does what he needs to do, then it kind of all works out in the end. Because it's so interesting, because it seemed like you came here to stop David, but I guess because you're here to save baby David, you're going to protect him while David does what he needs to, because in the end, you're both kind of aiming for the same goal. You're just going about it a different way to a certain extent. Whereas David's trying to go about it with revenge, Sydney's kind of going about it the path of love. which is something I never even thought about, because that was kind of like the whole point, where it's just kind of like, Sydney made that whole point last season of like, oh, what we got to do, we got to fight for love, but she kind of felt like David wasn't fighting for love, and in that instance kind of repeats in this case, because he's fighting for revenge to kind of save himself, but she's trying to save little baby David with love by telling his mom to be there in his life, to love him, so he'll grow up to be a different person than the David that she's come to know, So there's that whole situation. All the while you have that interesting situation with Switch. It's like, obviously she's getting older, her teeth, like, because I didn't even notice that, but at one point you can see her mouth open, you only see like one of her top teeth, and then at one point, like when she goes inside of like the time hallway, she spits out the rest of her teeth. She's getting older, and she's like, all right, I surrender. And just before I was like, oh man, I was like, no, don't let her go out like this. Her dad comes over and it's like, hey, like all your baby teeth have fallen out, your wisdom teeth have grown. Like the fact is, you finally know what it really means. It's a time travel. You've come to understand time travel, that it isn't a river, that it is an ocean, that it is beyond just one person to control. And I thought that was such a neat little thing. And someone had pointed out the fact is that like, oh yeah, she referred to herself like David had mistaken, like called her like a girl, but she was like, no, I'm a woman. And I think you can look at this as almost kind of like like fully like reaching adulthood, kind of fully understanding everything. And it's like, wait, what's going on? And then it's like, oh, her hugging her dad and everything. It's like, but then she looks back, it's like, oh, there's her body. She had died, but it's more so like they're apparently fourth dimension creatures. It's like, wait, what? You're dropping this on us in a series? What? I love that, and I'm fine with it being a thing of like, it is what it is, don't need an explanation. I think a lot of this series finale is that, of just kind of like, leave it to your own imagination. They were basically even saying that in the opening credits, of just like, only time will kind of explain what everything ended up being, essentially. But it's so interesting that basically, because I was wondering, I was like, are you supposed to be like, because I was like, yeah, because obviously she died, but I think the point was, because she died, she ended up leaving her physical form behind, that this time hallway is their native home, because they exist. They are time beings, which I'm wondering, is that supposed to be like a super like deep Marvel cut or something? Like, are they like I'm sure if you look it up, like is Switch like actually a mutant, or is she something like completely different within the Marvel universe? Is she kind of like some like celestial type of being? I mean, the fact is that you're kind of like, because she even refers to herself later on as time itself, so that's why I think they're probably like, their power doesn't come from being mutants, their powers come from them being literal fourth dimensional time beings that just take, like, when they're in their human form, it's like, oh, it is basically, when they're in their human form, that's them with their baby teeth, but the moment they die, they become this entity. That's when their wisdom teeth, their adult teeth grow into. That's what I think. And I think that's so interesting, because like the whole thing of like metamorphosis and changing, it's actually quite fascinating. So I thought that was kind of neat. But before she went off on her adventure, she's like, I got to do one more thing. And she goes back and visits Sydney. And she basically tells Sydney that basically David doing all that he's doing is going to change everything. But it's like, you want to know that everything mattered. That basically, it's like you and your friends, yes, you have a very important role in everything. But basically to say like all that death, all those lives weren't just lost. Because the whole point is, and it's getting all existential, like you want to know, I mean, and it's not just them, it's like human nature to want to feel like you matter, because she knows like if David does what he does, and that's a conversation that was brought up before of like, we'll just all disappear once David kind of does what he does. And so it is, and it is, in a certain sense, is a form of death, because this version of yourself will die because you will have never existed. Which on an existential level is kind of scary, and it is death when you actually think about it. It's so interesting when people take that perspective with it, because you never think about like, oh, time travel is a form of death, because you kill whatever because this isn't one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, technically, because I always bring that up when it comes to time travel and stuff, is that timeline, does it still exist? Because some continuities make it seem like that timeline is still there, it exists, it's going parallel, but obviously you exist in this new timeline is created. But I feel like a lot of times it's like, no, once you create a new timeline, the original timeline disappears and it's gone forever type of thing. And it seems like we're going with that storyline. And obviously it's hitting Sydney hard, because it's like, yeah, things might not have always been great, but this is still me. I'm still a person. I'm still going to lose my life. But she's like, the fact of the matter is, the version of you is going to be, was it gorgeous? Or I think was Switch's exact words. She even thanks Sydney as like, thank you for being there for me when I was in my human form, so. And you had Carrie asking like, what just happened? And Sydney's like, I think we just saved the world. So that was pretty neat. And then, like, on the other side of things is, Farouk and Charles talking. That situation, that scene played out way differently than I thought it was going to. In my mind, I was like, okay, he's going to turn Charles against David. He's going to make Charles see all the stuff that David kind of hinted away from. He showed some of the stuff, like, from season 1, but not just a lot of the stuff that he was a part of in season 2 and, like, all his faults and stuff like that. Because past Farouk had even said that, like, oh, your son wants to make it see, like, that's what future me had told me. The fact is that this boy of yours, he just acts like he wants to shift the blame to everyone else rather than taking responsibility for himself, that he is still just that baby, that boy, which is such a fitting thing, which I'll kind of get into later on. But that statement in itself, that David is still that baby, still that boy, it ranged true in many different regards. But I thought, like, that was the whole point, to turn Charles against him. But rather, they sit down and have a drink and they talk. And, it's like, I've been with your son for like 30 plus years. I've seen what he's seen. I felt what he felt. I've thought what he's thought. And the fact is, I kind of think of him as like, as your son. And he's like, yeah. And even Charles is like, the fact is, it's hard to hate someone who basically knows you so well. And for him, Farouk is like, the fact of the matter is, I'm not here to stop David. In fact, I'm actually here to help him on his quest. And it's like, wait, what? And it's like, the point is, it's like, because who he was back then is like, you, like, past Farouk, past me, did bring you here with bad intentions. The fact of the matter is, all I believed in was my power, and I wanted to dominate. But me now I look back and realize how weak I was. I was weak. And the fact of the matter is, I want to help David and the reason why I'm willing to do this is because I have changed. And I thought that was such an interesting thing, because that's what this is all about, change. And it's kind of interesting to think that someone we might have at one point in time viewed as the main antagonist had changed, So I just thought that was kind of a neat element, even to the point that Charles shows up and he stops David from killing Farouk. He's like, what are you doing? It's like, the fact is, this blood and war, it has to stop, because it's an endless cycle. It's like, Farouk, he's going to exist on his own and he's going to let us be. It's like, how can we believe him? It's like, as telepaths, we don't take people for their words. We are able to see into people's mind. We know their true intentions. And, for David's, for Charles, it's like, I wasn't there for you. For whatever reason, I don't know what it was, I abandoned you, which I can't even fathom I would do that. But whatever the reason was, I did it to protect you, which is so interesting. We never actually did find out the reason why Charles did give him up. Maybe it was because he thought whatever happened to David's mom took a toll, and it's kind of like, no, my son, he needs a better chance. And if he's just with me, I can't give him the love that he deserves. Whatever the case may be, things played out differently. Like I said, we never found out the exact reason, but I think it was in his own right a way, because maybe he thought, like, maybe at the time, maybe he didn't realize that Farouk was inside of David, and he thought, like, oh, that guy is a bad guy. He came after me, so I got to put my son in hiding so I can make sure that no one bad, if they ever come after me, that my son is always protected. I think that might be the thought process, because he might not even realize that Farouk was there, or maybe he did, and that was the whole point. That in itself, it probably never get the answer to it, but it's one of those things that's just probably like, hey, you can think what you think, So he hugs him and he's like, the fact is, let me make up for it. Let me be your father, because I will always be proud of you and love you. Basically know that, and hugs him. And David just kind of like hugs him back and cries. And that's the whole point. Like, once again, like, when you break down who David is, David's still that boy who wants to be loved and not treated like a monster, not to be thought like he was crazy, not to feel crazy so much of his life. And he's still that little boy pawning for his, someone's love and attention, like, because he felt abandoned by his family, and he's been striving to get it in whatever shape or form he could from person to person. And, he's lost so much family over the course of the series, lost so many people he considered close to him. So I just thought that was kind of a neat element to it. Even things ending amicably. Well, I'm almost about to skip over something. The whole, like, Farouk being like, oh, you've grown weak. And then, like, Farouk is looking at his past self like, man, you were so petty. The fact of the matter is, let me show you what I've seen. And he puts on the glasses and he shows him what David went through, like, them together. Like, because at the time, in season 1 and season 2, Farouk was so caught up in who he, getting revenge, getting back his body, like, essentially he was lashing out, not realizing at the time what he had. But after everything that he's been through, I think it kind of put things in a different perspective for him. I guess being in that time between time, like, we don't know how long he was actually in there in the confines of things, because time doesn't exist there. But the fact is, maybe it was long enough to kind of give him a different perspective on this whole situation. I mean, I guess when you look at season 2, the way it ends up playing out, you can make the argument he had changed, that he wasn't the same person he was at the beginning. He wasn't that Shadow King. He wasn't that one trying to oppress people. And especially when you think about the fact is that he was working with Division 3, with, Carrie and, both Carries and Sydney to stop David to kind of save the world, so he had become more of a hero. So I think that was kind of when things probably began to change, but it probably wasn't until recently where things really set in his mind of like what he had, what he experienced. Like he really had a very different perspective looking out on things, I think, this time through. So it's kind of interesting, but showing his past self, all of David's life and what they felt, what they've been through, that hurt, the pain, the happiness, all of it, every range of human emotion, that life he lived. And it was a beautiful life. It had its complications, but that's life for you. It has its complications. But to understand David and him actually shedding a tear, being like, thank you for showing that to me, and made him realize like, holy crap. And it's kind of interesting because like you can almost look at it as basically the entire series flashed before his eyes, because it wasn't just stuff from season 1, it was everything from season 2 as well, just like I said, what he felt and what he had been through. So I thought that was so neat. But then, like I was about to say before, like him and David being amicable, it's like, yo, shaking hands. He's even like, oh, when you grow up, what are you going to do? It's like, well, I'm going to be a baby, then a boy, then a man. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh yeah, when you do, come find me, we can dominate together. And he was like, I don't think so. And they shake hands. One of the surprises, did not expect this to end amicably. I saw this ending one of two ways. Either he kills Farouk and everything kind of falls apart, blah, 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 or maybe it's a situation of like, I kind of got a feeling he might die in the end, which to a certain extent, yes, when you actually think about it, because of the whole time and everything, technically David does die. Literally every character we've come to know and follow over the course of this series is dead. Even those who are dead in a different light, in a different situation, but it's so fascinating. Carrie, which that was kind of a beautiful scene. She's like, hey, old man. It's like, I don't think you can really be calling me that anymore. And I could be mistaken, but didn't she say like, oh, I'll call you brother? And he's like, I'm fine with that. I really like that, and just like, that was sweet, kind of like an ending for them, because like, that was always a thing between them, that like he was even brought it up in season 2, like eventually he'd grow old and die and she'd kind of have to live on her own, but now it's like they're basically the same age. So I think it's kind of a thing of like, we can go away, being like together on the same level, on the same par with each other. Whereas before there was so much difference between them, I think. But now it's like, we are different people, but we are still, siblings. We still have each other's backs, and that's how I'm looking at it. Maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way. It's still just kind of beautiful. And then Charles being there with Gabrielle and her being like all that she's seen, and he's like all the stuff that I've seen as well. But at the same time, it's like, the fact of the matter is, she's like, I can't do this without you. And he's like, yeah, we're going to be there for our son. Because, he saw what David had become, of like, oh yeah, like how angry and just how much he'd been through. It's like, we have to save our son from that, be there for him. So no matter what the circumstances may be, they are together. And, Farouk's kind of off doing whatever his thing is. I'm curious. Because that's the thing. Past Farouk will always remember what happened, because what makes you wonder what that... Because I think no matter what, even if they fade from existence, I think what they've implanted in your heads will forever stay there, I think. So what past Farouk learned from future Farouk, which he disappears as well, I think that's going to stay in him, just like what happened in this situation is going to stay with Gabrielle and Charles. And that's how I look at it. Not less is that thing of like, once it's all said and done, it fades from your mind. But I think the whole point is for it to stay there. So yes, they might disappear, but you remember that they existed. He remembers the man that his son could have been. And I think he's going to strive to make sure he becomes that to a certain extent, but at another point in time, just becomes a different person, leads a different life. And then you had the final thing of like Sydney and David being there, and it's like being side by side. It's like, so what happens now? It's like, well, we kind of fade away. But for her, it's like, he apologizes and everything, and for once again, it's still just knowing your existence is going to fade away. It's still kind of hard, but you kind of make the best of it, knowing like, okay, that a new path has been set for, there's different lives planned out for us. Even David being like, you're going to be basically growing and be magnificent without me in your life. And she's like, yeah, so Which once again is that thing of like, well, in season 2 when we saw the alternate timeline, we see her in a car driving by like I think it was like David in that timeline where he was homeless. I think it was that particular timeline he had crossed paths with her. So I think that kind of hints to the fact is no matter what, there is a chance that maybe they will meet each other. Who knows? Maybe life will be a little different. I don't know. Maybe their lives will play out exactly the same. Who knows? I mean, I think it's actually, because that's the thing. Like, I was like, okay, there's not a lot of time. Are they going to like quickly cut through like all the different people and where their lives are? It's like, no, you don't get to see that at all. Which I think, in all honesty, is okay. It's one of those things of like, you can wish what you want to wish. I mean, I think one way you can probably potentially look at it is because of this continuity, the way it ends. I think one way you could think of it is like maybe pick a certain continuity in the comic books and run with that being the timeline that, But I mean, obviously this is his own continuity and stuff like that. But I don't know if you could like fit this continuity into some pre-existing Legion comic books and be like, oh yeah, this is how things kind of ended up playing out in this storyline, and then like pick whatever comic book run you want to and say like, oh, this is how David's life ended up playing out. The reason why I'm saying that's an issue because like I don't know where his stories typically take place in the comic books. Are they like in the past or are they more present day? Like it depends, Like I said, this is my only instance of really getting to know David, to know Legion, so I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, that's probably another aspect to it. Like, I mean, once again, that's always going to be something there. Like, his craziness didn't just come from, Farouk. It was there because it stems from his mom's side of the family. But with both of them being there, they can't help each other. I even thought that was kind of that sad line of his, like, Gabrielle being like, oh, do you ever wish that you had let me stay sleeping? He was like, God, no, I thought that was kind of beautiful, because it's like all that they've been through, all that they have, it's like, I'm sure Charles wouldn't trade it for the world, especially knowing what the future could have been and knowing that they have a second chance to kind of basically make things right. You also have Switch kind of going off and, going through the universe with her father. It's like, it's the thing is like, oh, we use terms like daughter and father, but because they're entities the way they are, we'll just use those terms, but that's not really what we are. But I think it's pretty nice because even with things kind of playing out the way they do, Switch is never going to be born in this world again because she already lives. She exists as this entity, so there's no like reversing that. But everyone else, it's kind of, maybe things because of this one thing, because of David, so many lives can shift a different way. Maybe a lot of people be happier. Maybe David, like I said, maybe like you can make the argument it picks up certain continuity from the comic books. Maybe rather than being a bad guy, he's a good guy this time. It's kind of, it's one of those things that I like too, that the fact is it doesn't end where like 100% peaceful, where like Sydney is like, oh yeah, like I did this to save you. It's like, no, I didn't do this to save you. You're too far going to be saved. Like the path you went down. No. But this David, he's innocent. He's a child. Like, the fact is, there's a possible good future for him. So it's like, David, be a good boy, So, and then they fade away. So, like I said, it's so interesting. Because with a situation like this, you'd expect maybe like a time skip to be like, oh, this is where everyone ends up. Maybe even focus on David and Sydney kind of meeting each other in a different situation, but never clicking. Or maybe they do click. Even characters that died this season, you don't get to see like where they ended up, because it's like, oh, does Melanie and Oliver still find each other in this alternate situation? Then being an astral, you would assume even being in an astral plane, that might not, does that affect them? I would assume so, but that's the craziness of the show. You can just, you would want them to be like, no, give me some concrete answers, which I want concrete answers. Well, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? But that's time travel. You never know about the ripples. The ripples could have like the craziest effects. Who knows how like varying the degrees of difference between this continuity it would have been. Maybe it's like vastly different, or maybe it's just the smallest minute things, but even the smallest minute things have the biggest ripples, so it's such a complicated thing in itself. But I still think it's a great way to end off the series. Like I said, I expected things to be bloodier and just sadder, but it's a hopeful ending, which I was like, holy shit, wasn't expecting that. So that's what really kind of gets me pumped about it. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below, because I'm always curious to hear people's thoughts about certain series finale. Just because I really liked it doesn't mean it's going to sit well with other people. Maybe people wanted more. Maybe it was just enough for a lot of people. I'm very curious to know where you stand with this series finale. I think it's because I think it also shows you that this is a complete story. Like, whatever this alternate timeline is, doesn't matter, because that's not this story. That story was supposed to be, the beginning, the end. This is its story. This is its own story, and who David potentially could be, or these characters could be, is a story all in its own. You never know. It could be one of those things, because it has happened in situations where things are continued as comic books. So there could be a continuity beyond this series finale where it's like, oh, someone decides to do maybe like another run, or a little bit of just kind of showing you where it could be, like someone's new fresh run of like, oh yeah, this is Legion picking up after the TV show, and let's go. I mean, it might even blend in like other things that obviously the show hasn't, like, maybe X-Men that people might be more familiar with, like, your more well-known ones, like whether it be like your Cyclopses, your Wolverines, your Jean Grey, that type of situation. Especially knowing that in this continuity is like Charles is there, Gabrielle is there in his life. Once again, like, I don't know typically how Legion's story, David's story, typically plays out in the comic books, because regardless, I'm really interested to do some research after this just to kind of compare and contrast between the two. So, but I think I've kind of done enough rambling through it all. But oh yeah, I also forgot to say the most important thing when it comes to these series finale. Thank you for the wild ride that has been Legion. There is, I don't think, any other show quite like it. I don't know if there ever will be. So that's what makes Legion so special. Even amongst other superhero shows, there's no other show that can compare to the mind-bendingness that is this show. But like always too, I wish the best of luck to all the cast and crew in their future endeavors, So thank you for bringing such a wonderful product to me and so many people, Thank you for this complete and amazing story. That's all I got to say with that. So I almost forgot to kind of add that in there, but I'm adding it in here now. So yeah, really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.